Alan Bonner, let me go to you with this. You've media trained, you've worked for, you know, a ton of leaders over the years. I want to know whether there were any that you worked with who gave you pause, because on the one hand, their ambition to get the job was big, but you wondered and were not altogether comfortable about where they might take that power if they got it.
Well, first of all, two come to mind. One couldn't tell me why it was so important to become leader, and that leadership only lasted a couple of months.
You want to say who that was?
No, of course not. I mean, if you
don't so much more fun for the rest of us if you would.
If you don't have the substance of why you want to do something that I think that everybody's alluded to, you're not going to have much success. The other one wanted to talk about clothing. And
well, now you got to tell us who that one was.
This went on for about an hour, and I said, you know, you're opening up a store, and the store is called Politics, and you've got to have something on the shelf other than haberdashery. But you know, the earlier speakers raised three little points in my mind. One is the vast difference between the American and the Canadian system. The reluctant leader. And there's a famous painting of Washington being entreated to run while sitting on his porch writing letters and contemplating the world. This isn't a Canadian tradition. This is an American tradition in reaction to the divine right of kings. So we're a little different. When Mulrooney played the card that he was a rags to riches, up from nowhere guy, this didn't sound Canadian. To my ear, it sounded American. The oratory that the combination head of state, head of government has is different. On charisma, I like to look at it in terms of power, because nobody could say that Diefenbaker, Thatcher, Chrétien, King, or Nixon had charisma, but they sure did have smarts and power. And then finally, someone alluded to the fact that we don't know where we're going as leaders sometimes. I don't know what I'm coaching a leader for sometimes. The biggest foreign policy issue discussed in the Kennedy-Nixon debates, hotly debated, Quemoy and Matsu yes. Never again reared their ugly little heads in history, and so it is the unknown, the unforeseen, the general leadership fitness and the ability to deal with the unknown that counts.
Alan?
Speaking of having to be lucky, had it not been for World War II, Churchill would have gone down in history as on the wrong side of Indian independence, the wrong side of the use of chemical weapons, the author of the disastrous Dardanelles campaign. By the late 30s, he was already known, mid to late 30s, he was known as a crazy old man having drinks at the Carlton Club. The thing that mystifies me about Lincoln is his inability to get General McClellan to defend the North in the opening days of the war between the states. He famously said, if you're not using your army, do you mind if I borrow it for a while? Leadership should have also translated into being able to command his own general, and that's a mystery to me. The final thought that I have is nobody teaches followership. There are these leadership courses you can go to all over creation, famous ones, but nobody's teaching followership.
We're going to pick up on that.
You need followers.
Yeah, we're going to talk about that a little later. Let me pick up on the comment you made earlier, Alan. We'll come back to it right now about, you know, it's one thing for a society to create great leaders. Society, in order to create great leaders, also needs to create great followers. Do we do that in Canada?
Not in the slightest. I mean, we have a culture that has empowered everyone. Everyone's half-baked idea holds the same status as everybody else's half-baked idea, and the facts. You don't even have to have the facts. It's just to have a well thought out opinion, fervently held opinion, and what we need is more followership. People who can take orders, like in the military. Nelson Mandela was mentioned earlier. I think I'm paraphrasing him correctly when I say he said he was often like the shepherd. He might have been following all of his flock, but he was still the leader. A leader sometimes needs to pick an emergent leader for a particular task, get out of the way so that a team or a group can perform a task, realize that he or she is not always the right person for a particular task. And this is not discussed very much. Everything is you know, how can you be the bombastic, two-fisted leader, whether you're a man or a woman, or whether you're using charisma or any other thing. Sometimes consensus isn't needed. Sometimes action is needed. In the time it takes some meetings in either industry and government, you know, to decide something, you can go over to the corner and do it. No surprise to anyone that to a person, the political leaders and candidates that I speak to say exactly what Jeff Simpson just said. You can't boil it down into 8 seconds, et cetera, et cetera. I say, number one, I can find 40-second clips even on radio stations and on TV stations. There is time. Number two, if you can't boil your position on an issue down into a 750-word op-ed piece, 5 minutes on a morning radio program, even a 10, 15-second clip, you probably don't have a very clear position. The mysteries of life are boiled down into aphorisms in the Bible and the Koran and the Talmud and other great books, and you're telling me that what you're doing in the ministry of something really boring is so complex that you can't say it in a couple of sentences? I don't buy it at all. They're just lazy.
Alan Bonner, Political Conventions. Waller Newell, The Soul of a Leader. Great reads, both. Thanks, everybody. Appreciate your participation tonight.